There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being seen as something you are not. I have lived inside that loneliness for as long as I can remember, wrapped in silk and cashmere, placed on a shelf like an expensive ornament, admired from a distance by people who love me deeply but have never truly looked at me. My name is Choi Eun-woo. I am 28 years old. I am the youngest son of the wealthiest family in Korea, and I am an Omega. That last part, that is the cage. Not the wealth. Not the name. Not the expectations that come with being a Choi. No, it is the designation, that single biological fact, that has shaped every breath I have ever taken in this house. Because in my family, Omega means delicate. Omega means fragile. Omega means precious, and precious things are kept behind glass. My brother Choi Jae-hyun is an alpha. He is 34, broad-shouldered, quiet in the way that expensive watches are quiet, doing their work without noise or complaint. He is my hyung, my protector, the one who used to carry me on his back when I was small and complained about it every single time while never once putting me down. He loves me in the way that only older brothers can, fiercely, irrationally, and with a stubborn refusal to acknowledge that I have grown up. My parents are the same. My mother's eyes still soften when she looks at me the way they did when I was 4 years old. My father, a man who has made entire corporations tremble with a single glance across a boardroom table, will still pause his most important calls when I walk into the room to ask if I have eaten. They love me. I know this. But they do not know me. What they know is the version of me I have curated with the same precision I apply to everything else in my life. The soft smiles, the quiet demeanor, the elegant posture at family dinners, the way I defer and deflect and redirect conversations so effortlessly that no one ever notices I have done it. I graduated top of my class at Yonsei University. I work in the family's art acquisitions division, where I am respected for my sharp eye and my sharper instincts. I have friends, a social life, a carefully maintained public persona that is warm and approachable and utterly, deliberately unremarkable. No scandals. No dating rumors. No shadows on the Choi name. What my family does not know, what they have never even suspected, is that I am something they would not easily forgive. Not because I am cruel, not because I am broken, but because I am complicated in a way that does not fit the image of the delicate youngest son they have constructed in their minds. I am a player. Not proudly. Not shamefully either. Simply, factually. Since I was 22, since I first understood the particular power that being a beautiful Omega gave me over alphas who thought they were the ones in control, I have moved through a string of encounters the way a knife moves through water, cleanly, leaving no trace. I choose them. I enjoy them. I end them. I feel nothing particularly devastating when they are over, and I have never once looked back. Alphas, I have learned, are not as complicated as they believe themselves to be. Strip away the dominance posturing, the territorial scent, the arrogance that comes built into their biology, and what remains is something surprisingly manageable. They want to feel powerful. They want to feel chosen. Give them that and they will follow you anywhere. I have never given any of them more than I intended to give. Except for one. Except, always infuriatingly, inescapably, for him. Lee Ryan. Even his name, sitting in my chest, feels different from anything else I carry. I have been carrying it since I was 18 years old, the first time I saw him standing in our entryway, 3 inches taller than my brother, wearing black like it was a second skin, with eyes so dark they looked like they had absorbed every shadow in the room. He had looked at me the way you look at something that belongs to someone else. A brief, assessing glance, polite and completely indifferent, and then he had looked away. I had not looked away. I have never stopped looking. Lee Ryan is 33 years old. He is my brother's best friend, a title that somehow coexists with the other things he is. The things you hear in whispered conversations, the things that make grown men lower their voices and look over their shoulders. He runs an empire that exists in the space between legal and not, and he does it with the kind of cold, calm authority that suggests he has never once in his life been afraid of anything. People fear him. Genuinely fear him, the way you fear things that do not need to threaten you because they simply are threatening, because power like his doesn't announce itself, it simply occupies. He is beautiful in a way that has nothing soft about it. His face is all clean lines and deliberate angles, like something carved with patience rather than love. His jaw. The flat, unreadable line of his mouth that very rarely curves into anything you could call a smile. His hands, I should not notice his hands the way I do, but I do, every time, large and still and capable of things I spend far too much time imagining. I have wanted him since I was 18 years old and was too young and too foolish to understand what that wanting meant. Now I am 28 and I understand it perfectly, and it has only gotten worse. Every alpha I have been with, everyone, has been a failed substitute. I never told them that. I was kind in my endings always. But the truth is that they were all attempts to fill a space that had been reserved, stubbornly and without my permission, for a man who had never once looked at me as anything other than his best friend's younger brother. I had made peace with that. Or I had told myself I had. I was good at telling myself things. The morning it all began to unravel was ordinary in the way that dangerous mornings always are, quiet, unremarkable, giving no warning of what they are about to change. It was a Saturday. My brother was hosting a small gathering at our family home, the kind of low-key thing he preferred, a handful of close associates, good whiskey, the pretense of a relaxed afternoon that was, in the way of everything in our world, also slightly strategic. I had come home for the weekend as I sometimes did, more for my mother's sake than anything else, because she worried when she didn't see me regularly and I was, underneath everything, still her youngest son. I was in the garden when I felt it, that particular shift in the air that my body had, without my consent, learned to associate with one specific person. A deepening of the atmosphere. A subtle charge, like the moment before a storm when the pressure changes and the birds go quiet. I turned around and Lee Ryan was standing at the garden entrance. Hello guys, welcome to Mimi L. Before we dive into this story, note this is an original work of Mimi L. If seen in another channel that is not Mimi L, please report that channel for impersonation and copyrights. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, share and like for more stories like this. Now let's continue. He was wearing dark trousers and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows and he always looked like something that should be illegal to simply walk around being in public. He was speaking with my brother, half turned away from me, and he hadn't seen me yet. I had approximately 4 seconds to compose myself. I used them. By the time he turned and his eyes found me across the garden, I was exactly what I always was around him. Pleasant, faintly smiling, the picture of comfortable familiarity. Lee Ryan, I said, inclining my head just slightly. I didn't know you were coming today. Unwoo. His voice was low and even, the way it always was, like everything he said was a statement and not an invitation for conversation. He held my gaze for a moment, 1 beat, 2, and then nodded. You look well. Thank you, I said. My scent, I knew, was doing something I could not control. It had been doing it for years, that involuntary shift when he was near, my vanilla scent tipping into something richer, sweeter, a biological betrayal I had never been able to suppress no matter how practiced my composure. I had noticed it first when I was 22, when I'd begun understanding enough about omega biology to recognize what it meant. My body recognized him as something it wanted, even when my mind maintained perfect diplomatic distance. I had always excused myself quickly. Found a reason to leave the room, to step outside, to create distance before that scent shift became anything anyone might notice. I did it again that day. Smooth, practiced. Mentioned something about helping my mother in the kitchen. Gave a small, warm smile to the room in general. And I left. I did not know, could not have known, that this time, Lee Ryan had noticed. My bedroom in the family home was at the end of the east wing, away from the social rooms, and I retreated to it that afternoon with the particular desperation of someone who has been holding their breath for too long and finally has a moment alone to exhale. I closed the door. I pressed my back against it, and I stood there in the quiet of my childhood bedroom with my heart doing something embarrassing in my chest and my thoughts doing something worse. 10 years. I had been carrying this for 10 years and it did not get easier. That was the thing no one told you about longing, that it didn't erode with time. It simply settled deeper, became more specific, more precise. When I was 18, it had been the blunt, overwhelming thing that first loves always were, all-consuming and undirected. Now at 28 it was surgical. I could name exactly what I wanted. I could describe it in detail. And that was, in many ways, far more terrible. I moved to the window. The afternoon light was pale and clean, falling across the polished floors in long rectangles. Below, I could hear the muffled sound of voices from the garden, the low register of my brother's laugh, and then, lower, less frequent, the occasional word in Lee Ryan's voice. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. This was pathetic. I was a grown man, confident in every other area of my life, never uncertain, never wanting for options. I had been wanted by people worth wanting. And here I was 28 years old, coming undone by the sound of a man's voice 2 floors below me. I pushed away from the window. I was not going to do this. I was going to go back downstairs, pour myself a drink, and be exactly who I always was, pleasant, composed, untouchable. I was Choi Eun-woo. I did not come undone. I did not want things I could not have. I simply did not allow that. I believed this completely. For approximately 45 minutes. And then I was back in my room, and the afternoon had stretched into early evening, and I had managed the dinner and the conversation and the composed distance with the ease of long practice. And now I was alone again with the memory of him, the way the light had caught the angle of his jaw when he turned, the way his hands had wrapped around his glass, the way he had looked at me once, just once, with something in his eyes that I told myself meant nothing, that I had spent years telling myself meant nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were in my lap. And I thought, as I had thought many times before, in the secret dark of this room, of all the things I wanted that I would never allow myself to say out loud. It was 3 weeks later when everything changed. My brother had organized a larger gathering, business associates, a few family friends, the kind of event that required the full social machinery of the Choi household to be deployed with polished efficiency. I had come home for it at my mother's request, dressed carefully, done my part in the hosting with the ease of someone who has been doing this since childhood. Lee Ryan arrived late, as he sometimes did, slipping into the room with the unhurried authority of a man who does not experience being late as an inconvenience but simply as information about his priorities. He was in all black tonight, a fitted jacket, the collar of his shirt open at the throat, and the room adjusted to him the way rooms always did, conversations subtly reorienting, postures subtly straightening. I was speaking with one of my mother's friends when I felt it. That shift. That drop in the atmosphere. I did not turn around. I finished my conversation, excused myself with a smile, and, calmly, deliberately, moved toward the hallway. I needed a moment. Just a moment to let my sense settle, to get myself back under control. There was a bathroom on the second floor that no one used during gatherings, quiet and private, and I moved toward it with the purposeful ease of someone who had done this many times. Because I had a system. I had managed this for years with a system. I did not know the system was about to fail me. I slipped into the bathroom, closed the door, stood at the sink and pressed my wrists under cold water, a small trick for cooling an omega scent when it spiked. Something I had learned young from quiet research done in private because I had never been willing to admit to anyone why I needed to know. And then the door opened. I froze. Lee Ryan stepped through the doorway. He was still, perfectly, unnervingly still, his dark eyes moving from the sight of me to the running water at my wrists, to the flush I could feel rising in my face, and something shifted in his expression. Something that was not quite a smile and not quite anything I had a name for. He closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was very loud in the small room. Lee Ryan, I began, and my voice was almost perfectly steady. Almost. Your scent, he said. His voice was quiet, low, completely unhurried. It changes when I'm near you. My heart stopped. Restarted. Continued at a pace that was deeply inconvenient. I don't know what you. I've noticed it for a long time, he said. He wasn't moving closer. He was simply standing in front of the door with the particular stillness of someone who knows they don't need to move because the situation is already entirely under their control. Your normal scent is vanilla. Light. Composed. Pause. But around me it changes. Sweeter. Warmer. His eyes held mine, and there was something in them now, something dark and certain and intent. I've been wondering what that meant. The cold water was still running over my wrists. I turned it off. It's a biological response, I said, and I was proud of how even I kept my voice. It doesn't mean. I followed you, he said simply. I've watched you excuse yourself every time your scent shifts. Tonight I followed you. The silence in the small room was enormous. And? I asked. I did not know why I asked. Perhaps because the alternative was silence, and silence felt like losing something. And, he said, and now he did move, one step, just one, but in the small bathroom it'd have the distance between us, and suddenly he was close enough that I could feel the particular warmth that radiated from Alpha's, that specific heat that was biological and infuriating and which my entire body wanted to lean toward. I want to know Un-woo. My name in his mouth. He almost never used my name without the formal address. The absence of it now felt like a door opening. Know what? I said. My composure was intact. I was holding it together with both hands, and I would not drop it, I would not. How long, he said. How long you've been wanting me? The silence stretched. I looked at him. At that face I had looked at in secret for 10 years, at those dark eyes that were watching me now with an expression I had never seen him direct at anyone, focused and intent and not at all indifferent. Something in me, very quietly, put down what it had been carrying for a very long time. 10 years, I said. His expression shifted. Something moved through it, something that might, on a different face, have been called surprise. I was 18, I said. The first time I saw you. My voice was steady. There was something almost relieving about saying it, like lancing something that had been under pressure for too long. I've been dealing with it ever since. Dealing with it, he repeated. Don't flatter yourself, I said, and the corner of my mouth curved just slightly in the way it did when I was amused and trying not to be. I have been perfectly functional. For the first time I saw Lee Ryan smile. It was small, controlled, and it did something devastating to the already precarious state of my composure. I don't doubt it. He took another step, and now we were close enough that his scent, dark and warm like cedar and something deeper, was all around me, and my own scent was spiking in response in a way I had absolutely no control over. His hand came up and his fingers, those hands I had noticed too many times to count, curved around my jaw, tilting my face up, and the touch was careful and deliberate and not remotely tentative. "I've been trying not to notice you for a long time," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You're my best friend's younger brother. You're," a pause, "you were supposed to be off limits. And now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "you're standing in a bathroom telling me you've wanted me for 10 years and your scent is—" He exhaled very slightly, and there was something in that restrained exhale that told me, precisely and completely, that Lee Ryan was not as composed as he appeared. "It's making it very difficult to remember why I was trying not to notice." I looked at him. At this man who had occupied the most stubborn corner of my wanting for a decade, who was standing in front of me now with his hand on my jaw and his eyes on my face with an expression that was finally, not indifferent. "Then don't," I said. He kissed me. It was not the kind of kiss I had expected, if I had been capable of expecting anything at all in that moment. It was not tentative. It was not gentle in the way first kisses were often described as being. It was immediate and certain and consuming. His hands framing my face, his mouth moving against mine with the focused attention he applied to everything, and I felt myself respond in a way that was completely, humiliatingly involuntary, my body abandoning all pretense of composure and simply wanting openly and without apology for the first time in years. When he finally lifted his head, I was gripping the lapels of his jacket without having made a conscious decision to do so. His eyes were darker than they had been. "Un-woo," he said, and my name in his voice, quiet and deliberate, made something in my chest ache. "Yes," I said. "We should go back to the gathering," he said. I stared at him. He looked back at me and that small, devastating curve touched his mouth again. "Your brother is downstairs." I released his jacket, straightened, took a breath that did very little to stabilize me. "Right?" I said. "Yes, obviously." "But later," he said, his hand dropping from my face, fingers trailing briefly along my jaw as he stepped back, "you and I are going to talk." The word talk did not sound the way talk usually sounded. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, with the remnants of my composure reassembling themselves around me, "All right." He nodded, moved to the door, opened it and looked back at me once, one long measured look, and then he was gone, and I was standing alone in the quiet of the bathroom with my heart doing something architecturally unsound in my chest and the ghost of cedar and dark warmth still surrounding me. I pressed my fingers to my lips. 10 years. I looked at myself in the mirror, flushed, eyes bright, composure comprehensively destroyed in a way no one downstairs would be able to see because I would rebuild it completely before I walked back out that door, and I thought, so, that happened. What followed the gathering was not a talk. Or it was, in the way that storms are weather, technically accurate and completely insufficient as a description. He texted me that night. A single line, after the guests had gone and I had said my goodnights and retreated to my room in the east wing with the slow, careful movement of someone carrying something fragile. "Are you awake?" I stared at the message for a moment. Yes. The knock at my door came 6 minutes later. I don't know exactly what I had expected. I had spent a decade imagining this, and imagination, I discovered, is entirely inadequate preparation for Lee Ryan standing in the doorway of your childhood bedroom, coat gone, shirt still open at the collar, looking at you with that dark, unhurried attention. "Jae-hyun is asleep," he said. It was not an explanation. It was simply information. "Come in," I said. He came in. What happened next was, I have reached for words for it many times since in the quiet of my own mind, and what I always arrive at is this. It was like coming to the end of a very long journey and finally being allowed to set down what you were carrying. Every pretense, every layer of performance, every carefully maintained distance, gone. Just the two of us and 10 years of wanting, and his hands, which were exactly as I had imagined, and his voice which said my name like it meant something specific. He took his time. That surprised me. I had expected urgency, had expected the kind of alpha dominance that I had encountered in others, that pushed and demanded and took without asking. Lee Ryan did not do anything without intention. He learned me first. The line of my throat. The particular breath I took when he pressed his lips below my ear. The way my composure finally, completely dissolved when he pulled me against him and held me there, firmly and without apology, like I was something he had decided to keep. It was that specific thing, that quiet claiming, that undid me more completely than anything else. He was everywhere at once in the way that alphas were when they allowed themselves to be. His scent surrounded me, dark and warm, and my own scent rose to meet it in a way I had never allowed it to before, never felt safe enough to before, and the combination of the two filled the room like something alive. "Eun-woo," he said against my hair, and the way he said it was different from any other time, softer and rougher simultaneously, like the word cost him something. "Ryan," I said, and it was the first time I had called him by his name without honorific, without distance, and I felt him exhale. We were together until the deep of the night, and when I finally lay in the darkness with his arm around me and his steady heartbeat under my ear, I understood, with the clarity that comes only at the end of long-held breath, that this was not going to be something I could end the way I ended other things. This was not a substitute. This was the original. We did not talk about what we were. That was the second thing I learned about Lee Ryan, that he was not a man who narrated his own decisions. He had decided something, and the decision expressed itself in actions rather than declarations. He appeared at places I was. He texted with the spare, minimal frequency of someone who does not text frivolously but does not disappear either. When we were in the same room, the geometry of the space shifted slightly. He was always, subtly, aware of where I was. I was hyper-aware of where he was. That had not changed. But now, instead of the old familiar ache of wanting something I couldn't have, there was something warmer underneath it. Something that alarmed me precisely because of how unfamiliar it felt. I didn't analyze it too carefully. Analysis had always been my strongest defense mechanism, and whatever this was, I did not want to defend against it. We were careful around my brother. That was the arrangement we had reached without quite stating it. A mutual, wordless agreement that Jae-hyun did not need to know yet. My brother loved me in that fierce, slightly overwhelming way of his, and he trusted Lee Ryan the way you trust someone who has never given you a reason not to. Putting those two things in collision felt like something to be delayed as long as reasonably possible. So when Ryan came to family dinners, which he did with the same frequency he always had, we were exactly what we had always been. His best friend's younger brother, his best friend's trusted partner. Polite. Formal. The correct distance. Below the table, his fingers found my wrist once, briefly, and pressed. I did not react. I was very good at not reacting. But in the car afterward, when he drove me back to my apartment in Seoul, he reached over and threaded his fingers through mine on the console between us without saying anything, and the city lights moved across the windshield, and I sat in the passenger seat of a very expensive car driven by a very dangerous man who was holding my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I, Choi Eun-woo, player, Viper, the composed and untouchable youngest son of the Choi family, felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time. I learned him in increments. That was how it worked. He didn't offer himself in large pieces. He offered small, precise things and you could choose to notice them or not. I noticed everything. I learned that he drank his coffee black without comment but took 1 spoon of sugar when he thought no one was paying attention. I learned that he actually read, not performatively, but sitting in whatever chair he had claimed with a book in complete absorption in a way that made him look, for minutes at a time, like someone entirely different from the person the rest of the world saw. I learned that he answered his phone with a particular tone reserved for his subordinates, flat and cold as winter stone, and a different one for my brother, and a third one, slightly less guarded, that I learned to recognize as the one he used when he was answering me. I learned that he didn't sleep very much. He would be awake at 3 in the morning with his thoughts, which I knew because he would sometimes text at that hour. Nothing elaborate, usually a single line or a question, but the timing told me something about the interior of him that I didn't think he offered to many people. "Are you awake?" became a recurring message between us, sent at unreasonable hours, and the answer was almost always yes, and then came the conversations that felt different from all others, unguarded in the way that 3 a.m. made things, stripped of the careful layers we both habitually wore. "Do you ever get afraid?" I asked him once, lying in bed in my apartment with the city sound coming from far below. Pause. "Of what?" "Anything. Everything. I don't know." I turned onto my back. "You always look like fear is something that happens to other people." "It does," he said. "Mostly." Another pause longer. "Some things are more complicated." "Like?" He was quiet for a moment that stretched long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Losing things that matter." I held the phone against my ear in the dark. "I didn't think you were the type to get attached," I said carefully. "I wasn't," he said. "Until recently." And then before I could say anything, "Go to sleep, Eun-woo." He hung up. I lay in the dark for a long time, smiling at the ceiling like an idiot. Months passed. The shape of what we were continued to build itself in the spaces between our lives, stolen hours, careful distances in public, and then private rooms where all the careful distance collapsed into something that didn't need a name because it was too specific to fit into one. He was different in private. Not unrecognizable, he was always Lee Ryan, always that particular combination of deliberate and controlled, but the edges changed. The walls shifted. There were moments in the quiet after, his arm heavy across my waist and his breathing evening into sleep, when I would look at the ceiling and try to catalog what was happening to me. I had never stayed. That was the thing. I had never, in any of my previous arrangements, felt any particular desire to remain after. But with Ryan I stayed every time, and he never asked me to go, and sometimes in the deep of the night he would pull me closer without waking, unconsciously, the way you reach for something you want to keep nearby even in sleep. I was falling in love with him. I recognized it late, the way you sometimes recognize things you've been looking directly at. It arrived not as a revelation but as an acknowledgement. Oh, this is what this has been. I had been in love with him since I was 18 years old. The wanting had been there from the beginning. The love, the specific, chosen thing, the full knowledge of someone and the decision to keep wanting them anyway, that had grown slowly, built on 3 a.m. conversations and the careful way he handed me coffee and the sound of his voice saying my name in the dark. I did not tell him. This surprised me. I was not, generally, afraid of saying things. I had always prided myself on a certain directness. It was part of what made me effective, part of how I moved through the world. But this thing, this specific thing, I held close and did not name aloud because naming it felt like exposing something I wasn't ready to lose, and what we had, whatever it was, felt too important to risk disturbing. He was Lee Ryan. He was 33 and dangerous and had never, in any conversation we had ever had, spoken about love as if it were something that applied to him. So I held it. I held it beautifully, I thought. Until the night my brother found out. It was not a dramatic discovery. Those rarely are. Jae-hyun had come to Ryan's penthouse unannounced, which he did sometimes, had apparently always done because they were that kind of friends, and he had a key which I had known about in an abstract sense but had not, in the particular warmth of that Thursday evening, been thinking about at all. I was there. It was immediately apparent that I was there in a capacity that went significantly beyond the normal parameters of my relationship with my brother's best friend. The silence that fell when my brother walked in and found us was the specific, particular silence of something breaking. I have replayed it many times. The way Jae-hyun's face went through several things in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, understanding, and then something harder and colder that I had very rarely seen on my brother's face and never directed at me. The way Ryan went still, not frozen but the deliberate stillness of someone assessing a situation. The way I straightened and said, with a steadiness I was not remotely feeling, "Hyun, get out," Jae-hyun said. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Lee Ryan, and his voice had a quality I had heard him use exactly once before, in a boardroom confrontation that had not ended well for the other party. "Jae-hyun," Ryan began. "Get out of my sight," Jae-hyun said, still that flat, cold voice, "or I will say something I cannot take back." "He's talking to me," I said. "Not you. And I'm not going anywhere." My brother looked at me. The hardness in his face flickered. "Woo. Sit down, Hyung," I said. He sat. Because I almost never used that tone with him, the one that said I was not asking, and when I did he had always, underneath all his protective instincts, respected me enough to listen. What followed was a conversation that I will not recount in full because some things belong to the people who lived them, but the core of it was this. I told my brother the truth. Not all of it, not the 10 years, not the wanting, not what it had grown into, but enough. That this was not something Ryan had done to me. That I was not a victim of anything. That I was an adult with my own choices and my own desires, and that if he had a problem with that, the problem was his, not mine. Jae-hyun was silent for a long time. Then he looked at Ryan, who had sat across from him with the same contained, absolute stillness he maintained in all difficult situations, and he said, "How long?" "Several months," Ryan said. "And what are your intentions toward my brother?" A silence. I watched Lee Ryan. Watched something work behind his eyes. "My intentions," Ryan said slowly, "are to not let him go." Jae-hyun closed his eyes. "I hate you a little right now," he said. He was talking to both of us, I thought. "I want you to know that." "I know," Ryan said. "You're my best friend," Jae-hyun said. "And Eun-woo is," he stopped. "He's my little brother." "I know," Ryan said again. "If you hurt him." "I know," Ryan said for the third time, and something in his voice, flat and certain, said, "That's not going to happen." Jae-hyun looked at me. I looked back at him, my Hyung who had carried me on his back and complained the whole time and never once put me down. His face had something in it that was complicated and unhappy and, underneath it all, still loving. "I need time," he said. "Take it," I said. He left. The penthouse was quiet. I sat with the particular exhaustion of emotional confrontation and looked at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I felt Ryan sit beside me, and his hand found mine on the cushion between us, and we sat there in the quiet for a long time without speaking. "Your intentions," I said eventually. To not let me go. Yes. I turned to look at him. At that face, so carefully composed, so absolutely familiar to me now in its every small expression. You said that like it was a decision you'd already made. It is, he said. When did you decide? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I think before I was ready to admit it. His thumb moved across my knuckles. You have a way of occupying spaces you weren't invited into. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me, I said. The corner of his mouth moved. Don't set the bar so low. I laughed. Actually laughed, surprised out of it, and his hand tightened briefly around mine, and I thought, yes, this is the thing. This exact thing. Ryan, I said. I'm in love with you, I said, simply, directly. Because I was done holding it quietly, because it had been held quietly for 10 years and I was very tired of being careful with it. The silence that followed was not empty. It had a specific texture, heavy and warm and full of something that hadn't been said yet. He turned to look at me. His face, in the low light of the city outside, was open in a way I rarely saw it, the walls down in a way that felt significant. Unwoo, he said. You don't have to say anything, I said. I just needed to say it. I'm going to say something, he said. Let me. I waited. I have never, he said, careful and deliberate and choosing each word the way he chose everything, intentionally, let anyone in the way I've let you in. Pause. It doesn't come easily to me. Letting people matter. His eyes held mine. You matter. You've mattered for longer than I was willing to acknowledge. Is that Lee Ryan for, I love you? I asked. The small, devastating curve of his mouth. Yes, he said. That's exactly what that is. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Outside the city moved. Inside, in the quiet of the penthouse, something that had been building for 10 years settled finally into place. Not with a crash or a revelation, but with the simple, clean piece of something that has finally arrived where it was always going. My brother needed 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, he did not contact Ryan directly. He texted me occasionally, careful, neutral messages that told me he was processing rather than retreating, which I knew how to read because I had known Jae-hyun my entire life. He needed to move through it in his own time and his own way, and I gave him that. My parents did not know yet. That was a separate conversation for a separate time, and I wanted to wait until Jae-hyun had found his footing before adding that particular complexity. My mother, I thought, would arrive at acceptance faster than my father. She had always been more pragmatic beneath the warmth, and she had always watched me with sharper eyes than anyone gave her credit for. My father would need the formal structure of being told properly, but he was also a man who had built an empire on the principle that results mattered more than process. And the result? His youngest son, loved and safe and finally visibly happy, I thought he would eventually make his peace with. Eventually. In the meantime there was Ryan. There was learning to be in this new thing openly rather than secretly, which had its own adjustments. There was discovering that loving someone is not the same as the wanting you feel before, that it has a quieter quality, a dailiness, a particular intimacy in the ordinary. He still drank his coffee with secret sugar. He still read with complete absorption. He still texted at 3 a.m. and I still answered, and the conversations were different now, less careful, more honest, in a way that felt like exhaling after a long time of controlled breathing. He was still dangerous. That was something I had never needed to romanticize. I had always known exactly what Lee Ryan was, and I had not chosen him in spite of it but simply including it, the way you choose the whole of a person without requiring them to be different. The empire he ran existed in shadowed spaces and he moved through it with the absolute authority of someone who has never needed to shout to be obeyed. There were nights he came to me with something in his eyes that told me the day had been hard in ways he would not describe, and I did not ask, and he held me in the dark with a kind of grip that said everything his silence didn't. I was not afraid of him. I had never been afraid of him. I was, perhaps, the only person in his immediate vicinity who wasn't, and I thought sometimes that this, the specific quality of my complete lack of fear, was part of what had drawn him to me. You cannot truly rest near someone who is afraid of you. With me he rested. I had not known how much I had wanted to be that for someone until I was. Jae-hyun called Ryan on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks and 2 days after the confrontation. I know this because Ryan told me that evening, his voice carrying the specific evenness of someone reporting facts rather than feelings, though I had learned to read the feelings underneath. What did he say? I asked. He said he needs to talk. Pause. He asked me to come for dinner. Our family's dinner? Your mother's, yes. Saturday. I was quiet for a moment. My mother's Saturday dinners were a specific institution, formal in the way of family rituals, intimate in the way of something that has been repeated enough times to develop its own warmth. Being invited to one was not casual. It was something else. He told them, I said. I think so. I absorbed this. Are you nervous? A silence. Then dryly, I have walked into rooms where there were people who wanted to kill me and been less concerned about the outcome. I laughed. I couldn't help it. My parents are not going to try to kill you. Your father might. But his voice had that particular dry quality that meant he was under the flatness, something close to amused. He's not a man who responds well to surprises. He respects strength, I said. And he respects honesty. Come with honesty and he'll respect you for it even if he doesn't like it. Is that advice? From someone who has known him for 28 years? Yes, it's advice. Saturday arrived. I won't pretend it was easy. My mother opened the door and looked at Ryan for a long moment with an expression that was measuring and not entirely warm, and then she looked at me and then she stepped back and said, "Come in," which was not warmth but was not a door being closed, and in the grammar of my mother's household, the invitation inside was everything. My father shook Ryan's hand at the door to the sitting room. Both men were tall, both were accustomed to command, and the handshake lasted a beat longer than handshakes usually did, an assessment conducted without words and resolved without anyone speaking. Then my father said, "Sit down." And Ryan sat. The dinner was not comfortable. It was the particular discomfort of important, unspoken things being sorted through by people who communicate more in silences than words. My mother's food was, as always, extraordinary. She had a gift for hospitality that expressed love through nourishment, and the familiar rhythm of a family meal softened the edges of what was, underneath it, a complicated negotiation. Jae-hyun sat across from Ryan and did not speak much. He ate. He watched. At one point he refilled Ryan's glass without being asked, which was the kind of small, specific gesture that said things my brother would not say with words. Near the end of the evening, my father set down his cup and looked at Ryan with a direct, evaluating look that I had seen dismantle less steady people than Lee Ryan. "You understand," my father said, "that Eun-woo is everything," Ryan said. Not loudly. Not as performance. Simply, flatly, the way he said true things. Silence at the table. My father looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Once, the way he nodded when a business proposal had demonstrated sufficient seriousness to deserve further consideration. It was not approval. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement, and from Choi Day One, that was the beginning of everything. My mother looked at me across the table, and her eyes, soft and sharp simultaneously, the way they had always been, held mine for a moment. And then she rose to get more tea, which was her way of moving the room forward, and the dinner continued. Afterward, when Ryan and I were walking down the steps of the family home into the night air, I heard footsteps behind us. Jae-hyun. He stopped a step above us, putting him at eye level with Ryan, and the two of them looked at each other for a moment in the quiet of the night. "If you hurt him," Jae-hyun said, "I won't forgive it." "I know," Ryan said. Jae-hyun nodded. Then he looked at me, at his little brother, who was not delicate, who had never been delicate, who had been carrying a 10-year love in secret and had finally been allowed to set it down, and his expression was something I could not fully name, but it was not anger anymore. "Come to lunch on Sunday," he said. To both of us. Together. As if we were a both. "Okay," I said. He went back inside. Ryan and I stood at the bottom of the steps for a moment in the cool night air, and I slid my hand into his, and he closed his fingers around mine without looking down, without comment, as naturally as breathing. "Well," I said. "Well," he agreed. "My mother's going to interrogate you at Sunday lunch." I expected that. "My father's going to ask for a formal account of your business dealings at some point." Also expected. "And my brother is going to be extremely passive-aggressive for at least another 2 months before he fully accepts this." "Eun-woo," he said. None of that matters." I looked up at him. At his face in the low light, at the dark eyes that were watching me with that particular, specific attention. Focused and constant and not going anywhere. "No," I said. "I suppose it doesn't." Spring came. With it came something that looked, from the outside, remarkably like ordinary life, which was, I had discovered, the most extraordinary thing. Ordinary life with Lee Ryan. I had not anticipated how much I would love the ordinary of it. Sunday lunches at Jae-hyun's, where the passive aggression did gradually, per my prediction, thaw into something warmer, where Jae-hyun began, slowly, to recalibrate his relationship with Ryan from best friend to something more complicated and ultimately still best friend. The two of them had history that went back decades, built through things I didn't fully know and didn't need to. That history didn't erase, it absorbed the new information and continued. By April, Jae-hyun was teasing me about Ryan at lunch, which was his version of acceptance. "You've been mooning over him since you were 18, he said, gesturing at me with his chopsticks. "And you never told me." I'm very offended. You would have been horrified, I said. I am horrified. I was horrified. I've processed my horror. He looked at Ryan with the affectionate exasperation of long familiarity. He's still my best friend and somehow also now my brother-in-law, which is... We're not married, I said. Yet, my mother said serenely from the other end of the table, not looking up from her food. Silence. Ryan, I noticed, did not correct her. I looked at him. He met my eyes with perfect composure and a very slight expression that, on his face, constituted something dangerously close to smug. I looked back at my plate. I was privately devastatingly pleased. I am 28 years old. I am the youngest son of the wealthiest family in Korea. I am an Omega, and that single biological fact has shaped my life in ways both limiting and freeing. The cage that never quite contained me, the thing that led me to learn my own strength in the particular way that you learn it when others underestimate you. I am Choi Eun-woo, and I am a great many things my family did not know about me for a long time. I am also, finally, openly, without secret, Lee Ryans. This is what love looks like. I have learned when you have spent a decade carrying it quietly, it doesn't arrive as a crescendo. It arrives as a door opening. As a room you've been standing outside for a very long time, pressing your ear to the wall, and then one day the door is simply open. And inside is warmth, and the smell of coffee in the morning, and the low sound of his voice, and the particular weight of his arm across your waist in the dark. He is still dangerous. He is still the man who walks into rooms and makes them quieter by his presence alone, who conducts the business of his empire with cold, absolute authority, who people fear and defer to and do not cross. That is who he is. I have never wanted him to be different. But he is also the man who takes secret sugar in his coffee, who reads until 3 a.m., who texted me first all those months ago at an unreasonable hour because he was awake and thinking, who held my face in his hands in a bathroom and said how long with something in his eyes that had been waiting just as long to be released, who said I'm not going to let you go to my brother as simply as stating whether, who said you matter in the precise, deliberate way that Lee Ryan says the things that are true. I could have loved him less if he had been a safer person to love. I know that. Some part of me understands that the danger of him, the darkness, the complexity, the particular way he occupies the world, is part of the wanting. Not because I am reckless, but because I have never believed that beautiful things are only found in safe places. The most beautiful things I know are the ones that cost something. This one cost 10 years of quiet carrying and a bathroom confession and a family storm, and learning to say I love you out loud to a man who did not have easy words for his own feelings but who said them anyway, carefully and truly in his own way. Worth it. Every single year of it. On a Sunday in April at my family's home, at a lunch that has become a reliable ritual, my mother's food, my father's careful but warming acceptance, my brother's exasperated affection. I sit beside Lee Ryan at the table and his hand finds mine under the table briefly, just once, a press of warmth and certainty, and he does not look at me when he does it because he does not need to. I know. I look at the table, at the familiar faces of my family around it, and I think, this is the shape of what I was always moving toward. All the careful distance, all the quiet management, all the viper-smooth exits and composed performances, they were armor I wore because I was waiting for something real enough to take it off for. I found it. He is sitting beside me, and his thumb traces a small circle on the back of my hand, and outside the window the spring is doing what springs do, opening everything that winter had closed, green and persistent and entirely indifferent to how long it took. Some things take exactly as long as they need to. I am Choi Eun-woo. I am, at last, exactly where I want to be. There is a particular kind of night that belongs only to the two of us. Not the public nights, the dinners, the gatherings, the careful choreography of existing in the same space while the rest of the world watches. Not even the ordinary nights, comfortable and warm as those have become. I mean the nights that exist in a different register entirely, the ones that begin quietly and end with me completely, comprehensively taken apart by the hands of the most dangerous man I have ever loved. Tonight is one of those nights. The city lights beyond our penthouse windows had long since blurred into a soft golden haze, the kind that promised the world could wait until morning. I lay beneath Lee Ryan on the wide bed we'd claimed as ours, my Omega body still trembling from the last wave of heat that had finally crested and broken. His scent wrapped around me like warm velvet and rain-soaked pine, grounding me, claiming me all over again. His large hands slid down my sides, slow and reverent, thumbs brushing the sensitive dip of my waist where my skin still flushed pink from his earlier kisses. Eun-woo, he murmured, voice rough with that alpha timbre that always made my knees weak. Look at me. I did. His dark eyes held mine, pupils blown wide with the same need that pulsed between us. I was already open for him, Slick and aching, my body prepared by nature and by the hours he'd spent worshipping me with his mouth and fingers. He shifted, settling his hips between my thighs. The heavy, heated length of him rested against my entrance, thick and velvet smooth, the head already glistening with a bead of his own arousal. I exhaled shakily, fingers curling into the strong muscles of his back. Please, Ryan. I need you inside me. A low growl rumbled in his chest, possessive, loving, and he pressed forward. The broad head of his length breached me slowly, stretching me open with that perfect burn I craved. Inch by inch, his thick length sank deeper, filling the empty ache that only he could soothe. I gasped, back arching, as every ridge and vein dragged along my inner walls, lighting up nerves I didn't know could feel so much. He was so big, so hot, the weight of him inside me making my toes curl and my thighs tremble around his waist. When he bottomed out, the base of his length pressed flush against me, I felt the first subtle swell of his knot beginning to form. Not yet locked, just a promise. Ryan stilled, forehead pressed to mine, breathing hard. You feel like heaven, he whispered, lips brushing my temple. So tight, so perfect for me. I couldn't speak. Only moaned softly as he began to move, long deep rolls of his hips that dragged his length almost all the way out before sliding back into the hilt. Each thrust stroked that spot inside me that made stars burst behind my eyelids. My hands roamed his back, nails digging in when pleasure spiked sharp and sweet. Slick poured between us, easing the way, the wet sound of our joining mixing with his quiet grunts and my broken whimpers. He angled his hips, changing the depth, and suddenly his length was hitting that perfect angle with every stroke. I cried out, clenching around him, my omega instincts urging me to pull him deeper, to keep him forever. Ryan's hands slipped between us, fingers circling the sensitive bundle of nerves at the apex of my thighs in time with his thrusts. The dual sensation, his thick length stretching me wide and his skilled touch, pushed me right to the edge again. Ryan. Am I close? I gasped, voice wrecked. Come for me, love. His voice was pure alpha command wrapped in tenderness. Let me feel you. I shattered. Pleasure crashed through me in pulsing waves, my walls fluttering and squeezing tight around every inch of his length. My vision widened out. I felt him growl above me, hips snapping harder, chasing his own release. Then the knot swelled fully, hot, thick, locking us together as he buried himself to the hilt and came with a deep, guttural moan. Pulse after pulse of his warmth flooded me, filling me so completely I felt claimed down to my soul. We stayed like that, locked and panting, his body a solid, protective weight over mine. His length remained buried deep, the knot pulsing gently with aftershocks that sent little sparks of pleasure through me every few seconds. I turned my face into his neck, breathing in his scent, tasting salt on his skin. I love you, I whispered against his throat, voice hoarse but full of everything I felt. My alpha, my everything. Ryan's arms tightened around me. He kissed my hair, my closed eyelids, the corner of my mouth. And I love you, my omega. Always. His fingers traced lazy circles on my hip as the knot held us together, safe and joined. The city lights kept glowing beyond the glass. My body was already spent from the long day and the heat that had lingered earlier, but Lee Ryan had other plans. His scent filled the air, thick with pine and rain and raw need, as he pulled me back against his chest the moment I tried to slip under the covers. Ryan. Wait, I breathed, a tired laugh escaping me as his large hands slid under my silk shirt, palms hot against my skin. He nuzzled into my neck, lips brushing my mating mark, sending sparks straight down my spine. You've been teasing me all evening with those soft little sighs, he murmured, voice low and rough. His fingers traced lower, dipping beneath the waistband of my pants. I shivered, heat pooling despite the exhaustion weighing on my limbs. I twisted away playfully, slipping from his grasp and padding barefoot across the cool marble floor toward the sitting area. Ryan, I'm tired, I protested, glancing back over my shoulder. My heart raced as I saw the hungry glint in his dark eyes, the way his broad shoulders tensed like a predator ready to pounce. I didn't know your urges would be this overwhelming. We've already gone 3 rounds today, give your omega a break. He rose from the bed, tall and powerful, his robe falling open to reveal the hard planes of his chest and the unmistakable bulge straining against his pants. A slow, predatory smile curved his lips. Running, Unwoo? You know that only makes me want you more. I backed up another step, giggling breathlessly even as Slick began to betray me, warmth slicking my thighs. I'm serious. My legs feel like jelly and you're still insatiable. But my protest was weak, my body already responding to the alpha command humming beneath his words. In 2 strides he closed the distance, scooping me up effortlessly despite my half-hearted squirm. I yelped as he tossed me gently onto the wide bed, following me down and pinning my wrists above my head with one hand. His free hand pushed my thighs apart, settling his hips between them. The heavy, heated length of him pressed insistently against my entrance through the thin fabric still separating us. "Shoo, love," he whispered, kissing the corner of my mouth, then my jaw, then the sensitive spot beneath my ear. "Let me take care of you. Just one more time. I need to feel you around me." I whimpered, trying one last time to wriggle free, but his scent and the gentle dominance in his touch melted my resistance. "You're too much. I really am tired, Ryan." His eyes softened even as desire burned brighter. He released my wrists and cupped my face, thumbs stroking my cheeks. "Then let me do all the work. I'll be gentle." He kissed me deeply, tongue sliding against mine until I was moaning into his mouth, my body arching up to meet him. Clothes vanished between heated kisses and roaming hands. When he finally pushed inside me, the thick length of him stretched me open so perfectly that my protest dissolved into a broken moan. Inch by inch, that velvet-smooth, heavy length filled me completely, dragging along every sensitive spot until I was trembling beneath him. He moved with slow, rolling thrusts, deep and deliberate, his knot already beginning to swell at the base. I clung to his shoulders, nails digging in as pleasure overrode exhaustion. "Ryan, oh gods, it feels too good." "That's it," he growled softly, angling his hips to hit that spot inside me with every stroke. His hand wrapped around my own aching length, stroking in time. "Come for your alpha unwo. Let go." The orgasm crashed over me like a wave, pulling a cry from my throat as I clenched tight around every thick inch of him. Ryan followed moments later, burying himself to the hilt as his knot swelled fully, locking us together. Pulse after pulse of his warmth flooded me, marking me inside and out while he groaned my name like a prayer. We stayed locked, panting, his body a protective blanket over mine. I buried my face in his neck, breathing in our mingled scents, a soft smile curving my lips. "I love you," I whispered, voice hoarse and sated. "Even when you're overwhelming." Ryan chuckled, kissing my temple as his fingers traced lazy patterns on my hip. "And I love you, my beautiful Omega husband. This, right here, is our true end. Just us. Forever." The city lights twinkled on, but in the quiet afterglow of our joined bodies, nothing else in the world mattered. This was our epilogue, tired, claimed, and utterly complete.